You're listening to the Assembly Call IU podcast and postgame show, the place where Indiana fans across the globe hang out online after every IU basketball game. Join us for our live broadcasts on Thursday nights and immediately following every IU game at our website, assemblycall.com. That's assemblycall.com. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another disappointed episode of the Assembly Call, as tonight your Indiana Hoosiers fall on the road at Maryland 78-75 to the Terrapins in a game in which the Hoosiers solved the big problem coming into it. They got off to a great start, jumping out to a 9-0 lead, playing some of the best defense that we've seen this team play all season. But unfortunately, it could not sustain. And despite leading by 8 at halftime, Maryland came out and went on a 16-0 run in the second half, and Indiana never fully recovered. The Hoosiers were able to pick up some buckets late to get it a little bit closer. They only lose by 3, but this was a total breakdown in the second half. Ironic, given how Indiana's been better in second halves than they have been in first halves. Tonight, it was flipped, and Indiana loses a game that we kind of expected they were going to lose coming in because it's a tough matchup, but after the way they started, it really makes the way that the game went in the second half all that much more painful. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. I'm here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. We are going to break it all down for you on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show, and let's start this show the way we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And for me, the banner moment tonight, obviously Rob Finney getting back when he checked into the game at the 15:40 mark, I think that was just a huge moment to have him back in the game, and we're going to talk about that. But the moment that I'm going to assign to the banner moment is the three-pointer that Romeo made at the 2:20 mark. He was about 5 feet behind the line. At the time, it brought Indiana within 5, and it came on the heels of 2 empty possessions that I so wish we had back because the game might be different. When Al took that quick 3 and Devontae got in the lane and took that mid-range jumper, we came up empty. Romeo was going off or was about to go off. And if maybe he had those possessions, who knows how this game is different. But Romeo was terrific in the second half. He had 20 points. He was 6 of 6 or 8 of 8 from the line, whatever it was. But the most important development, I thought, was that three-point shot because he would make another one later, a little step-back 3. He made 3 threes tonight. I thought he looked more confident shooting the 3 than we've seen him. It actually, to me, and we'll get Ryan's thoughts on this later, it looks like he's actually changed up his shot a little bit, kind of simplified it. Like, it looks like his release is a little bit better to me. And this marks now 4 straight games that he's made a three-pointer. He's shooting in the high 30s over that stretch. We talked early in the season, if Romeo could add that three-point shot to the rest of what he was able to do offensively, it would really take his game to the next level, and we've seen that now. Another huge outburst from him. Obviously, it was too little too late, and we'll talk about that. But seeing him have one of those kind of Romeo explosions, like we know that he had in high school that we've kind of been waiting on, he was certainly good enough in the second half tonight for it to have been in a winning effort. Unfortunately, no points from the bench, the struggles on defense, the offense just wasn't enough. But seeing him do that and seeing a player that talented, it's having players that are that talented in your program that give you a chance to win banners. Now, we may not see another player as talented as Romeo for a long time, but having those kind of guys in your program is what gets you to that next level. Clearly, Indiana has one of them, and Romeo showed off all those skills tonight on the offensive end. All right, tonight's Hoosier Proud banner moment brought to you, as always, by our friends at Hoosier Proud and Home Field. At homefieldapparel.com, you will find the comfiest and most unique licensed IU apparel available anywhere. And at HoosierProud.com, you'll find great state of Indiana-themed apparel while sending 10% of your purchase to causes around Indiana like Down Syndrome of Indiana. Both brands were started by an IU grad, and all Hoosier Proud and Home Field apparel is designed and printed out of Indianapolis. And with the new year now upon us, turn back the clock by checking out Home Field's IU Crest sweatshirt, featuring an IU Crest design that dates back all the way to the year 1910, and it's printed on a fleece tri-blend crew neck that is immensely comfortable, the same material of that Bison logo sweatshirt that I have gushed about ever since I got it. It's so comfortable. And of course, don't forget to use the promo code ASSEMBLY at checkout to get 15% off your order on either site. That's promo code ASSEMBLY at HoosierProud.com and HomeFieldApparel.com. All right, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. And we will start with Andy Bottoms. Andy, your bottoms line on tonight's IU loss.
It's funny because you look at some of the stats from the game. You talked about the quick start. That was one thing that everybody, IU needs to get off to a quick start. Check, done. Make your free throws. 16 of 16 from the line. Check, done. Turn the ball over very little. 7 turnovers in the game, 1 in the second half. Check, done. And they lose the game somehow. And the reason that you lose the game when you do those things is defense in the second half was just atrocious. There was a stretch that I charted here. 21 possessions, IU scored 33 points. So that's 1.57 points per possession. By any measure, that's incredibly good. They made up 0 points on Maryland during that stretch. They basically played them to a draw. You had to score 1.57 points per possession during a 21 possession stretch to just stay even in the game. And unfortunately, that came on the heels of a sequence where IU had 8 straight scoreless trips after that Juwan layup to start the second half. And that was really where the game turned. That Maryland went on a huge run. They opened up the lead, and no matter how well IU played offensively, they just couldn't get back in the game. And, they cut to the one point of Archie in the huddle where it's like every time we, to paraphrase, every time we trim down the lead, they just go right by us and score, or whatever was said. Either way, that was a nice break from listening to Tim Brando, acquaint himself, not reacquaint, acquaint himself with these teams. So just a rough night. It's one of those where I think, you compare this to the Michigan game where the margin was much more in that game. And I think somehow people walked away from that game probably feeling better than they'll walk away from a game that IU lost by 3, just because it feels like a huge missed opportunity and really puts a lot of pressure on that Nebraska game coming up on Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go over to Ryan. Ryan, I know you've got a rant ready. Let's go. Let's hear it.
Yeah, normally if we had won this game, my rant would have been completely Tim Brando based because he was god awful tonight on the broadcast. But had he never watched a game of basketball before? I don't know what was going on. He certainly had never watched.
I know 2 teams he hasn't watched play basketball.
I know for sure. That's what I was going to say. He certainly hadn't watched either of these teams play. Here's what I have to say. A lot of people are going to laud Romeo after this game, and he should be. He's an amazing player. It was unbelievable. 28 points. He was hitting great shots at the end, making things happen. He needs to do that from the tip, and maybe not on your first possession of the game, but when things start going poorly for IU, that's when you need Romeo and you need Juwan Morgan to really step up. And they waited too long to step up. Romeo waited until there was about 6 minutes left to go, okay, I need to score. And that's not how you win games on the road. Your stars need to be stars. Juwan Morgan had 14 points and 8 rebounds tonight. That's an okay game on the stat sheet. I thought he was a complete non-factor in the second half for most of it. And the second half is where he's lived so far in this season. I realized he was facing a tough task against Bruno Fernando and Smith down low. Those are big guys who can really defend. And Morgan struggled to find his rhythm in this game. If you're just looking at the numbers, you think, okay, he had a nice night. He didn't, though. I didn't feel like this was a good Juwan Morgan performance. And I know we're asking a lot of him, but right now, those 2 guys are so much of what Indiana does offensively. Justin Smith, when he was in there, was great offensively. But guess what? He got 4 fouls and missed most of the second half, which killed IU on the defensive end. But also, it left an option on the offensive end. And the problem is when you're playing this injured, and look, Rob Finnis, he was great to see him back, but he was clearly limited tonight. Deron Davis tried to go. It's clear he was not healthy, and we didn't see him. I don't think we saw him at all in the second half. You've got guys like Fitzner and McRoberts coming off the bench who are giving you nothing. I mean, you really have no depth. And when that's the case, your stars, there's no leeway. Your stars have to be stars every night, particularly on the road. And try as they might. Look, I love Al Durham. He had some big buckets tonight. Devontae Green gave whatever he had, 15 points, no turnovers. Took some bad shots, but guess what? Somebody had to shoot at one point or another because the offense was so stunted. We'll talk about that, Jerod. Don't shake your head at me.
Some of those shots are like turnovers.
Yeah, he was 4 of 10. I mean, it's not like he shot 20 shots and missed 18 of them. So what I'll say, though, is, yeah, maybe some of those shots were bad and they're turnovers. But you know what? Romeo wasn't demanding the ball. Juwan Morgan wasn't posting up and demanding the ball. they were just kind of playing within the offense. And in the situation Indiana was in, where the offense was completely stunted for 2 really long stretches, they need to step up and say, give me the basketball, let me go to work. And what that does is it makes the defense focus on you, and it opens things up for everybody else. And that's what needs to happen on the road. And Romeo did it late. And that is encouraging that he'll maybe figure out how to do it a little earlier. But he did it against Illinois late, and he did it against Maryland late. But it was too late in this case. Midway, like early in the second half, he and Morgan should have demanded the basketball.
Well, then is that on Archie then? To see that this is happening and say, hey, guys, you're the stars.
Sure.
Let's go.
Sure. Some. Sure. But honestly, Morgan's a senior leader. He shouldn't have to be told when he needs to step up. He should be able to do it. Romeo is going to be in the NBA next year. He shouldn't need to be told when to step up. Yeah, a little encouragement from the coaches saying like, hey, let's go is fine. But those guys know. And those guys know what they need to do. And so I'm not ripping them. I'm not saying they played poorly or whatever. I'm just saying those guys need to know. They need to sense the game. When the game's getting away from Indiana, when they're against a 16-0 run, those guys need to take over and make shots and make something happen to stem the tide. And they didn't do that. Indiana got so far behind that, without miracles on defense, which, look, the defense was terrible. We all know it. That's why they lost the game. But without them turning it around defensively, that was the ball game right there. The game was over early in the second half. It really was. And I think we all felt that way.
Yeah, what I would say, though, hang on. So when you talk about that that's right.
That's how you take over right there.
So when you
stars stars.
So when you say that about them, so here's the stretch in the second half, the beginning. This is just the end of the possessions. I didn't write out all this, all right? But Juwan scores a layup on the first basket. Maryland scores immediately. The next shots were Al Durham missed 2. Devontae Green missed 3. Devontae Green missed 2. Al missed 3. When Fitzner got just annihilated trying to, post up for an hour before they blocked his shot. I mean, that's 5 straight possessions. Like,
right. But
some of these other guys have to understand who to get the ball to. That's what I'm saying. But
why are those guys shooting?
I don't know why.
No, I'm asking you. They're shooting because Romeo doesn't go get the dang ball. He plays within the offense, which is fine, and that's you should do that normally. But when there's a big run coming, Juwan Morgan needs to say as the ball's coming up the court, get the ball to me in the post. These guys talk to each other on the court. They're not mutes. They don't, it's not like, it's not like they're walking up the court and it's like, well, no, who are we going to get the ball to? Juwan needs to say, hey, give me the ball.
Well, if you're Devontae Green and you're the point guard, aren't you aware of who the best players are and who you should get the ball to? That's your job as the point guard.
Everybody is at fault.
Wrestle the ball away from him while he's bringing it up the court.
Yeah, if you need to. I mean,
that's how Ryan does it on the show. So
yeah, you just did it right now. See how easy it was? No, but I mean,
okay. Here's the thing. I will say. I think you make a good point because it reflects the reality of this team. Like I just like those.
It's not like Romeo wasn't getting touches.
But here's the thing: those 2 possessions, and it was 64-58. I mean, Al and Devontae took such quick shots, there wasn't time to get the ball to Romeo.
Those are bad shots.
So what I'm saying is it's a balance. It's not just on Romeo and Juwan. No, it's also, I think this is...
I didn't say that it was not on other people. What I said was, is that people are going to be lauding Romeo for this performance. They're going to be looking at the stats and saying, Juwan had a good game. But when the team really needed them, when they were in the middle of that 16-0 run, they did not step up when they were
I'll tell you something else that would have helped on the 16-0 run. Having your best defensive player on the court. Because I think the key to losing this game, do you realize Justin Smith was plus 22 tonight? And I thought while he was on the court, he was awesome. Now, what he did is he made 2 really dumb fouls in the second half. The one, he's reaching for an offensive rebound that he has no chance to get. And the other one, he slapped the guy. And maybe they're questionable fouls, but you know what? He probably just shouldn't be reaching there. And Justin Smith has become too important to this team to make silly fouls. A month ago, hey, I've got the ball. This is a big moment. I've got the ball. You're not taking it away from me.
I'm taking it from you.
But he's become too important to this team to do that because, where did this go wrong in the second half defensively? And I'm sorry, I think if he's on the court, it at least equates to 2 or 3 more stops, and it's a totally different ball game down the stretch. So tonight,
That's fine.
as important as Romeo and Juwan are, I just want to highlight, for anybody who has missed the development of Justin Smith defensively, he's become the key cog to our defense. And I will say offensively tonight, he scored in 4 different ways. He scored in transition. He hit that little jump shot. He scored on that alley-oop dunk. And he took it from the top of the key all the way to the hole. So, there's a lot of bad stuff tonight, but I thought the minutes he was on the court, on the road in a big game, and this is about the time last year that he really came around, he was really good. And if he hadn't made those dumb fouls, I think we win this game.
Okay,
so,
let me just clarify something, because I felt like I got run over with a truck there by you guys. I'm not saying that Romeo and Juwan aren't great and that it's their fault we lost. What I'm saying is, when you're in a stretch like that, where you're getting run 16-0, it's not like they weren't touching the ball on those possessions. You're right. Later on, there were some quick shots that needed to not be taken. You're absolutely right, Jerod. But Romeo was touching the ball every time down the floor. He was just giving it up. And you're playing within a team system. I get it. It's fine. But you need to sense and read the game and understand that, sometimes you need to take the ball screen, and instead of passing it around the perimeter, take the ball screen and turn north and south. Get fouled. Stop the momentum. Whatever you do, drive into the middle, and maybe then you kick it to somebody instead of just kind of going through the flow of the offense. You need to demand the ball, and you need to make things happen. And for Juwan, he needs to post up Bruno Fernando or Smith or one of those guys and get them in foul trouble, like he did later in the game.
But I would say, like when it was 43-37 and momentum was starting to turn, Juwan got 2 buckets on offensive putbacks. He did. He did that. So, they did at times. I just think you're making an overly simplistic argument, is what I'm saying.
It needs to be consistent. I'm sorry, when you're on a 16-0 run, Jerod, your stars need to step up and do something to stem the tide. I'm sorry, they have to. I would say that about any team, not Indiana, not Romeo or Morgan or whoever. I would say that about anybody. When you're in a 16-0 run, somebody needs to do something. And who are we relying on to do things on this team? Romeo and Juwan. That's it. So that's my argument, is that in the middle of that, and look, I think another time Archie should have called it a second time out. I really do, because he called the first one. That was right, but it didn't really stop anything. He should have called the second one, and he did. So I'm not saying you blame these 2 guys for this loss. I'm saying everybody is to blame. It's a team game. But what I am saying is, during that run, Indiana needed something. And who do we turn to on this team when you need something? It's those 2 guys, and they need to sense the game and step up in those situations.
Also, when Rob can play 30 minutes, that'll help too, because he
of course it will. Of course it will, but that's not the reality right now.
Andy, why don't you get the last word on this before we take a break?
Oh, I don't have it. I said my part on the other piece. I do think Justin, to circle back to that point, I thought one of the first things, it looked like, Alex Bozich tweeted out, one of the first things Archie Miller said on his postgame radio show was that they really, losing Justin to foul trouble in the second half was a huge turning point in the game. I think that contributed not only just in kind of base defensive scenarios, but also, trying to limit Maryland's offensive rebounds. He's just a dramatically better rebounder than anybody else they were going to put in for him. And that was just a huge struggle. And like you said, that the 4th foul was unfortunate, where he's coming to double, and maybe that was a foul. The one that really was just a giveaway was the one that he got on his 3rd foul, where Jalen Smith has him completely blocked out. There's just no way that you're going to get that ball, and you just have to know. And I think it's something that we've talked about. It's interesting because we talked about that so much with like Romeo and Juwan after the Michigan game, about trying to, you have to understand that you giving up a basket here is not the worst thing in the world that can happen. And it's kind of funny that we're at a point where Justin Smith defensively is at that point there, where it's like, you can't be off the floor if IU is going to be what it is defensively. And so, I think that underscores how important Justin has really become, but he's got to be smarter than, making the 3rd foul there and not putting him in a position where, the 4th one, while maybe a questionable call, you just can't put yourself in a position where that's the one that's going to take you off the floor, because there was clearly no alternative. The other thing Archie said was he, kind of set Duran up to fail by playing him, that he probably shouldn't have been out there tonight. And that's why you didn't see him in the second half. And he just, while you look at him and say, hey, here's a big body you can put on Fernando is so mobile that's, a terrible matchup for Duran, even at full health. I think that becomes difficult. So it was tough. And that, that level of offensive rebounding, while they didn't have a ton of second chance points, so they'd have 9 in the second half. I think it was just extending possessions, the amount of time that IU had to play defense, the energy they had to exert when they weren't getting anything off the bench.
Yep. All righty. Coming up, as we continue our breakdown of Indiana's loss to Maryland, I will point out tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed, and then we will go inside the numbers to highlight the most important statistical notes from the game. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Brian Phillips, and we are breaking down Indiana's 78-75 loss to Maryland at the Xfinity Center tonight. It is time now for tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed. I've got a couple of them. I want to start with another bad stretch in the second half that didn't involve Romeo or Juwan. We talked before when it was 64-58, those two straight possessions where Allen Devontae took quick shots that preceded Romeo's explosion. Who knows how the game's different there. I'll tell you another stretch that really turned the tide. Right before the under 12-minute timeout, it was 45-44. Indiana had kind of battled back. Al Durham had hit a big three-pointer to pull Indiana within one, and then boom, IU gives up 5 straight points. On one play, Evan Fitzner bit terribly on a pump fake, and it created a rotation. Maryland threw a couple passes, got a wide-open three-pointer. They drained it. Devontae goes down on the other end. And I don't know what it is about Devontae when he gets an open lane, but he has got to be the worst at actually hitting an open layup that I've seen. I don't know what goes through his mind when it actually opens up, but he bricked a layup. And he made some shots tonight, but this was terrible. He bricked a layup. It's like he's trying to be too fancy with it. Then he doesn't get back on defense, and Cowan just goes the other way and scores. And right like that, when you felt like Indiana might be ready to get back in and at least, kind of start playing toe-to-toe, exchanging buckets, now it's 50-44. And, I don't think Indiana really got a lot closer than that until the end there. It was kind of, Maryland started nursing that, 6 to 10 point lead. Andy, what other stretches jumped out to you? Those two, when you look at the quality of the shots and then the defense on the other end, those were just backbreakers because they were moments when it felt like Indiana had a chance to get back in the game.
Well, and right after the layup that you talked about, that was when Al got called for the moving screen on the dribble handoff. That Maryland was just basically their defense to those was just to run through everyone and see what would happen.
Yeah, he didn't even set a screen; he just got run into.
No.
It was like he didn't have a chance to set a screen.
No, that was it. That was in the midst of the Cowan 3 started or was right in the midst of a series where I think Maryland scored on like 8 or 9 straight possessions. I would have said had IU actually won the game, there was the other stretch that I thought about was at the end of the first half, when Archie brought Juwan back in with 2 fouls, kind of sensing the game was getting a little bit away from him, and Juwan makes a bucket inside, Al gets a 3, and then Juwan blocks a shot at the end. It really felt at the time like, IU had stemmed the tide a little bit, pushed the lead back.
Established order,
back to 8 at halftime, and they got it up to 10 on that first play of the second half where Juwan slipped the screen and got a layup, and then everything pretty much went to hell from there. But I thought that was another, a surprise, really, that he put him back in, because when he got that second foul, it was kind of like, well, he's done. But I think it was good. I think you're starting to see from him, partly depth related, a more of a willingness to put guys in with 2 fouls, and it really paid off in that stretch. Just didn't pay off in the long term. But I mean, in all honesty, when you look down the possessions here, like the stretches where IU did not score are just littered with guys other than Juwan and Romeo being the ones that used possessions or took shots or whatever the case may be. I mean, when those guys were using possessions, it was really pretty impressive offensively, but ultimately, just didn't matter because they couldn't string together enough stops on the defensive end.
I mean, those guys are both using 25-26% of possessions. You look at guys like Carson Edwards and Ethan Happ, they're up in the 30s. I do think it's time for Romeo and Juwan to start using 28, 29, 30% of the possessions. I think it is. No.
So you agree with me?
No. Listen, I agree that they should use more possessions because I think some of the other guys take bad shots. I don't think it's a bad thing to give your best players more possessions. I absolutely agree. I don't agree with your tone, like almost that, they were responsible for the big run. But we're not going to rehash that.
I never said that.
You did too say that.
I didn't. I said in that run, you need to step up. And
right.
They didn't.
And other guys should. Okay, we're not going to get back into that. Okay.
I could go off all night, Morris.
All right, I've got another. I've got
busting you up all night.
I've got another meaningful moment that we will all enjoy reflecting on. So it's at the 12:30 mark of the first half. Juwan's got it on the right block, and he passes it out to Devontae on the left wing. Juwan reposts, and Devontae proceeds to throw one of the greatest post entries that I've ever seen, because he threw it from the left wing to Juwan on the right block. He kind of put a little spin on it. Juwan ends up getting 2 attempts at the bucket over Fernando. He missed both, but Devontae continues to be this team's best post feeder, and when he doesn't. I was about to say, when he doesn't get too fancy with it, like that wasn't fancy. It looked pretty, and he put a little spin on it because he had to get it there.
Yeah.
So look, the thing with Devontae is his creativity. And his just, kind of natural aggression and confidence is what allows him to make great plays. It's also what forces, compels him to take shots that we all question. But it creates passes like that most players wouldn't see, and then most players also wouldn't attempt. And I thought that was just a beautiful pass. So I just wanted to reflect on that because it was a thing of beauty. Brian, what other moments stuck out to you? What possessions do you want to criticize Juwan and Romeo for not grabbing the ball?
The run was but actually, you know what? It started to turn towards the end of the first half, and Andy mentioned that, and they kind of stemmed the tide a little bit, but you could feel the game getting away from them at the end of the first half. You really could, and Maryland started beating Indiana with its offense at the end of the first half. So I really thought that was a meaningful stretch, because while Morgan did have that great block and Al hit a 3, you got the feeling they went into the locker room with some confidence, and that was really bad. And honest, quite frankly, Indiana had a very long stretch of not scoring in the first half. They could have buried Maryland in the first half. And to Maryland's credit, Maryland didn't give up. Maryland kept plugging. They just weren't hitting shots. And I really think that Indiana had an opportunity to just put this game away in the first half, but didn't, and lost some opportunities. I think the adrenaline wore off of the start of the game wore off, and everybody in the arena kind of got flat, and that really hurt Indiana because they could have absolutely put this game away early.
Yeah, I'll tell you one other one that stood out, and this can lead us in, Andy, to looking at the stats. 7 seconds to go, Rob Finney makes a free throw. The first bench points of the night. So this was yet another night where Indiana just doesn't get production off the bench. Evan Fitzner doesn't score. He had one nice wide open 3-pointer that was a good shot. He just missed it. Duran obviously not able to really do anything. Zach McRoberts not an offensive factor right now. So it was yet another game where the bench just isn't giving anything. And so when you look at the numbers, and Andy, you pointed out some of the other numbers that were good. The free throw numbers are really good. The turnover numbers are good. Some of those key indicators. But then you start looking at the defense, and it was a horror show, and especially on the glass. So I don't know, Andy, if you want to be the one to talk about the defensive. I feel like we should have drawn straws for who has to talk about rebounding, because it was a horror show.
Yeah, it was not great. I mean, yeah, the bench points up until Finney makes those shots. I mean, that's even with those shots, that's 7 bench points in the last 3 games for IU. I mean, you just can't. You can't survive that way, and the problem is that it then leads you to have to play. Juwan plays 36 minutes, and that was what's sitting out with a little bit of foul trouble. Romeo plays 34. Those guys are just gassed.
That's why we need Devontae coming off the bench, because he can score points. Yeah.
And in the second half, Juwan plays all 20 minutes. Romeo plays 18 of them, because you can't take those guys to the court. And part of that is Justin Smith, because then there's nobody else that you can really put in. They got to find ways to get something out of guys off the bench. I was really surprised that Clifton Moore didn't at least get a chance to play. I'm not saying he would have done well,
but at least he had some light.
But I struggle to believe that he would have given you any less than what it felt like.
That's curious, because Archie has media availability. I mean, basically said, look for Clifton to. So I'm not sure what the thinking was there. I wonder if he'll even say in his post game that he meant to get him in. I mean, because
given this season, he probably got injured in warm-ups and is out for 3 weeks. I mean, this has just been bad luck. And look, we're talking about the bench and stuff like that, and you say, like, wow, I really wish he would have done something else. I mean, what is he supposed to do? I mean,
this is the point we're at, where you put Clifton Moore in a game where the defense was a sieve.
Then, Fitzner was out there for what he played, like 18 minutes tonight, and is that what it was? The stats haven't updated to me. 18 minutes, and I mean, honestly, if they were going to give somebody a rest, like he's the only guy they could throw out there. I mean, McRoberts, again, non-entity offensively, played pretty well, and we know what Zach's dealing with. So and he's probably not going to be healthy until the season's over. So I appreciate the effort and everything, but Fitzner is just an empty jersey right now. But there's no other options. It's ever maybe Clifton Moore. I mean, Jake Forrester, I think he would have gotten abused by those two.
He's coming off an injury too.
Yeah, and they said he's cleared, but he's still. That doesn't mean you're 100%.
No, Clifton is the guy that I feel like of those 18 minutes
has to be, and maybe they're just not confident there right now. I don't know what it is. The coaches know the team better than us, but Fitzner out there for so long. I mean, you feel bad for the guy because his confidence is just completely shot. He had a wide open 3 that he was hitting early in the year, rimmed it out, and that would have gone miles to helping his confidence. And it went in and out. It wasn't like he missed it badly. It went in and out. And that would have been really big for him, I think, to have hit that. Maybe then he's cutting a little harder because he knows he can contribute. He's doing some pick and pop stuff. I will say this though, man, I'm just kind of riffing on what I'm thinking right now. And I really think that Nebraska game is huge on Monday.
It is huge.
Absolutely huge. Not just for the record in the Big Ten, because it's a long season. There's plenty of time left for this team to do whatever it's going to do, but just for the confidence of these guys. I mean, it's enormous for them to get a win. And again, as we talked about with this game, stem this run, like stop this run of badness and just say, okay, there's things you can take away from a game at Maryland. I think that if you asked me before the game and said Maryland's going to beat Indiana by 3, I'd be like, you know what, that's probably okay.
This was essentially the Ken Palm prediction right
here.
And
it's everything they're dealing with. The fact that they came out so well, had the lead, and lost it, and how it happened, that makes it disappointing. But if you back up and just look at it on the schedule, you say, okay, yeah, road game against a team that's probably just outside the top 25, you lose by 3, it's not too bad. But we all saw what happened, and that's what was concerning. There's a lot they can learn from this loss, though.
And the other stat that jumps out is Indiana jumps out to a 9-0 lead, and we haven't really touched on that too much, because obviously it gets lost and everything. Yeah, something like that. And that was a great start. Indiana came out playing with their hair on fire on defense. They really were executing well on offense, and that was great to see. This Maryland team, they just played a game at Minnesota where they were down 6 at the half and outscored them by 20-something in the second half. So I haven't followed their games all year, but maybe they're a team that plays better in the second half. Who knows? The thing that I think that early start did is, you get out to that early lead and you feel like you should kind of coast the rest of the game. This Maryland team presented some real challenges for Indiana because of their size, because of their ability on the offensive glass, because this is not a great defensive rebounding team. And those things ended up, obviously coming true as we went down the stretch. And then, Justin missing that time in the second half, So, I think when you step back and look at how this game played out, it's kind of understandable. It just stings more because you come into it thinking, man, our big problems are the way we start. We turn it over too much. We don't make our free throws. We did all of those things, and we lost. In part, because of how bad of a matchup it was, because Justin Smith was out, and just because of some really poor execution there for a long stretch in the second half. So, Andy, what else jumps out to you?
Well, a couple of things. One of them goes along with what you talked about. Points in the paint. Maryland ended up winning that 36-32, but that was really lopsided in the second half. I think it was 22 to. I wrote down what it was at halftime. 22-16, maybe in the second half. I mean, they kind of dominated. A lot of that's offensive rebounding. They had 10 offensive rebounds in the first half. Managed to not get any second chance points. 8 offensive rebounds in the second half. 9 second chance points. And I think giving up 10 offensive rebounds in the first half, but not allowing them to score any points off of it is a little bit of, smoke and mirrors, I think, to a certain extent, where IU got away with some things in the first half. But the one thing that IU also did in the first half was turn Maryland over a little bit. They had 8 turnovers in the first half and just 1 in the second half. And those would have been ways, and that was just when, at the very end, when Cowan was trying to dribble out that rebound at the, it was their, next to last possession, that, they went the better part of 19 minutes before they turned the ball over. And I think that speaks to, the defensive intensity and the difference in that between the first half. At least IU was giving up points in some stretches, but they were able to, stop runs by getting a timely turnover and things like that. In the second half, that just didn't happen. And it allowed IU to not get any get out and transition at all, as we kind of talked about on the show last night. I mean, you're busy taking the ball out of the basket every time. You're not able to really generate easy offense that way. And I thought that was, you can point to lack of depth and the toll that's taking on the guys who are playing. But the level of intensity that was really there in the first half was just not in the second half, and things snowballed really quickly. And I think, at times it felt like they thought they could outscore them, but just with a few defensive stops, it might have actually worked, quite honestly. But, you forced, Jalen Smith, he was 0 for 9, but he still had 10 rebounds and impacted the game in that way. I mean, didn't have some great, outside of Fernando, really not great shooting performances for Maryland. They only shot 41% from the floor, but they rebounded probably close to half their misses, or maybe half their misses, and just gave themselves extra possessions. And in the second half, didn't give turnovers to IU. So just not being able to find avenues to get turnovers or get easy buckets for IU was a big one. And 4 assists in the second half was it. It was a lot of only way they could really score was to kind of go one-on-one, try to get downhill and do that. But the bench points and the rebounding to me are the numbers that really stick out from a negative perspective when you look at it that way. And just hard to get by and win a road game when you're just getting so little production out of the bench. And again, it's not just points. 2 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 turnover, and 8 fouls from the bench in those minutes. It's just not enough.
Not good. Ryan, any other final stats for you?
Yeah, just one last thing. I think we have to give Maryland credit, too, also. They ran some pretty good offense in the second half. I know Indiana wasn't defending well, but I think it was a combination of two things. Maryland put a lot of pressure on them. Fernando went off in the second. There were, some of those plays in the post where Juwan was playing him straight up, playing good defense, and, you got a bigger guy, making hooks over you. You're not going to defend that.
He only shot 2 free throws. I mean, we didn't put him at the line.
Defended him without fouling.
Yeah.
And they knocked down some shots too. They had some scramble threes that went in. I mean, so you have to give Maryland credit. They played very well in the second half. I think that's kind of getting lost in the shuffle. They dropped 51 points on what is a good defensive team. And not all of that can be attributed to bad defense. I think some of it was them running some really good offense. So credit to them. They got into it in the second half and really were humming offensively.
Mark Turgeon getting a game ball, maybe. No.
little offense I like to call throw the ball at the basket and go get the offensive rebound, because they can't get it.
All righty. Coming up on the Assembly Call, we continue our breakdown of Indiana's loss to Maryland. We'll talk about some of the other guys like Al Durham, dive in a little bit more to Juwan Morgan's night, and some other stuff. That's here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game, plus every Thursday night at our website, assemblycall.com. And while you're there, make sure that you sign up for the free IU Hoops email newsletter that we send out. Over 6,000 of your fellow IU fans are subscribed, and it will make you a smarter and more well-informed IU basketball fan. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms, and we are breaking down Indiana's 75-73 loss to Maryland tonight. It's funny, we get to this third segment. We usually have several topics that I feel are obvious that we haven't hit. And tonight I feel like we hit a lot of them because those first 2 segments went kind of long.
A lot of arguing, a lot of yelling.
Yeah. So that's okay.
Gnashing of teeth.
I do want to talk a little bit about Al Durham because while I don't think his shot selection on that three-pointer when it was 64-58 was good because it was too quick, and I think at that point you've got to be patient and run a little bit of offense. I thought he did some encouraging things tonight. I thought a couple of the threes that he hit were big shots, like the one at the end of the first half when the lead was down to 5. That was a big shot. The 3 that he hit to make it 45-44, those were big shots. And we're starting to see his confidence emerge a little bit because, again, I think some of these games earlier in the season he was disappearing in a little bit. And now, to me, he's showing a little bit more mental and physical toughness and a little bit more confidence. And I think that's good. And I think he's a guy that, even with Rob back, and whenever Rob reassumes, his position as the starting point guard, I think Al's going to stick in the starting lineup, and then you'll have Devontae coming off the bench. And so I thought overall tonight from Al, I'd love to have that one possession back. and defensively, I don't really think anybody played well for that stretch in the second half.
I thought he was okay.
Yeah.
I mean, he was trying to do too much because he was trying to help on over rotations and all that stuff. Because we've talked about this with defense before, and we talked about it after the Michigan game. If one guy is off on his rotation, then everybody else has to compensate. It makes everybody look bad. So if you see Al scrambling late to his guy, it might be because he had to help on somebody else's, not just that he laid off too long. And so, I thought there was a lot of scrambling that went on. Maryland's floor spacing was much better in the second half, and that puts a strain on the defense no matter who you are.
Yeah. I want to reflect a little bit on Juwan Morgan's tonight.
Hey, one quick thing to go back to that. I tried to jump in, but had muted myself. So, I saw a huge difference in defensive rotations and the number of times it felt like IU was scrambling when Justin Smith wasn't out there. I know I feel like we're beating a dead horse, but I mean, his
defense has become elite. Like it just is.
It was night and day different just in terms of his awareness. If you go back, and I strongly discourage anyone from going back and watching this game, but if you hate yourself
watch like the first 5 minutes, and
if you hate yourself and want to do that, I mean, watch when he's on the floor, just his kind of awareness of where to be, where to go next in the rotations, and then watch a couple minutes, which is all you'll be able to stand when he's not out there. And that was really in the second half where things really got out of hand. Just guys scrambling and things like that.
So I want to talk a little bit about Juwan Morgan. Ryan, we talked about his line. Is 14 points. He's 7 of 13 from the field, 8 rebounds. Did have a block and a couple of steals. And, he was 0 for 3 from 3-point range. Usually he would make, 1 or 2 of those, and that, makes his points look a little bit better. The way thinking about the matchup that he has, Ryan, against Bruno Fernando, it was always going to be a little bit tougher for him down low to do what he typically does. And, I agree that, maybe earlier in the game he can be a little bit more assertive, that kind of thing. But I thought overall defensively, I thought he did a pretty good job because he defended Fernando without fouling, had to play 36 minutes. Like he can't go all out 100% for 36 minutes. Like you can tell that there are times that he gets a little bit gassed out there when he can't get,
as he should,
when he can't get a few more breaks. So I don't know in a matchup like this, I don't know how much more we're going to get from him if he's not making his threes, because he, down low, I mean, he had that nice scoop shot. Like he found ways against a guy that's much bigger and stronger than him to score. This was always going to be a game, I thought, where he's probably going to get, 14, 15, 16 points, and your perimeter guys have to step up and score more, which Romeo did. So, I don't know. And I guess in hindsight, I have a harder time asking more of him than what he gave tonight, given the matchup, because I thought overall he played pretty well.
He did, and look, when I criticized he and Romeo earlier, I said their lines look fine. Like you say, you get 14, 8, an assist, 2 steals, 1 block, no turnovers out of Morgan. You're like, yeah, that's a good game. It's when you pick and choose your spots to go. And also we have to understand that with the injuries, these guys are playing so much time. And I think also, and Andy made this point earlier, that with the offensive rebounds, these guys are having to play 60 seconds of defense at a time sometimes, or 45 seconds of defense instead of 1 shot clock. You're having to play 2 shot clocks worth of defense. And that really wears you down because you get more tired playing defense than you do offense. And so Indiana was on its heels defensively for long stretches of the second half, and even parts of the first half. They had I think they had 10 offensive rebounds in the first half too. So it really puts pressure on your key guys who are guarding their key guys. And Morgan he had the assignment of Fernando for most of the night and defended him really well, as you said.
As well as he could, Yeah.
And sometimes a guy like that's just bigger than you. He's going to beat you. I mean, we saw Thomas Bryant do that at Indiana for 2 years. He'd have a guy on his back and he'd just beat him. And no matter what you did, he's just bigger, he's longer, he's going to score. And
Juwan can't foul, so there's only so much he can do in that matchup.
Yeah, and honestly, why would you at that point? Make the guy shoot over you and you're happy. And he did that a lot, and Fernando just happened to hit him. And then he banked in a 3 at one point, which, that was when I knew the game was over. But look, I think that with Juwan, he played well. But again, it's not even about scoring. It's about when the ball is in his hands, defenses have to pay attention to him. And I feel like if you get him the ball on the block, Fernando can play him one-on-one, but everyone's going to be watching. And that's when you can maybe get something going for somebody else. Like, get him the ball on the block, have guys cut off of it. So, some of that is coaching. But I also feel like when this team is down and when it's struggling, the play is give it to Morgan in the post or give it to Romeo, get him a ball screen at the top of the key. Those are the two things this team needs to do when it's struggling, because those are the best plays you have in your, it doesn't matter what offense you run. Those are the two best plays you've got in your back pocket. And I feel like those two guys also need to know how to communicate that to everybody else. Feel the game out. They shouldn't need a timeout, to get that. They should feel the game out and say, okay, now we need to do this. So with Morgan, I just felt like he disappeared in some stretches where he could have shown up. And part of that is, again, he was he was matched up with a really good player, and you're going to disappear at times when that happens. But, I don't know what the solution is as far as that goes, but it was a decent game for Juwan. You can't, whine and complain about it. It was a decent game, but you feel like in certain key situations, you need a bucket from him, and you need to be able to get it no matter what no matter what the situation is.
You like to see him get to the line more than 0 times.
True.
And you could argue that he should have, because he doesn't often get many calls.
Look, and on 18 offensive rebounds, I would say at least 8 of those, Maryland was climbing up the back of Juwan and Justin and whoever, and Fitzner and whoever else was in there. They're at home, but after the first 5 minutes, they weren't getting those calls. You're not expecting to get them the rest of the game. But they were getting shoved around, and it happens. So it's part of playing on the road in the Big Ten.
I think that's one of the things Juwan usually can get some offense off of is putbacks, and he was the only guy on IU that had an offensive rebound, and was responsible for IU's 2 second chance points. But I think at least 2, maybe all 3 of the rebounds were just off of his own shots where he was already right by the basket. Like, he wasn't getting any that were kind of outside of his immediate area after he shot the ball. And I think that one speaks a lot for Maryland's rebounding and just generally their size. And I thought this was a game where Juwan's a little bit undersized when you really think about what he's being asked to do. And this felt like a game where that really was evident, just based on how big Fernando was. I think it was evident on both ends. Juwan's trying not to foul and just be there with his arms up, and just unfortunately against a guy like that's just not necessarily going to be enough.
Yeah, I thought they were tougher and kind of quicker to 50-50 balls after about the first 10 minutes. And I was about to say, well, we have guys playing so many minutes, but we had 2 guys play 30 minutes. They had 3 guys play 30 minutes, and Cowan and Fernando both played as many minutes as Romeo and Juwan. So, I don't know, Ryan, I think you make a good point that when when you lose the offensive rebounding battle, whatever it was, 3 to 20 something, you are playing a lot more defense. So, that can tire you out, but still,
it's the consequence.
I think, and it'll be interesting to listen to, to what Archie says, because after the Michigan game, he said that he thought that, we just weren't tough enough at the start of the game. And I think he's right. And I think this is still a program that is learning how to be tough for 40 minutes, both mentally and physically. Now that, we came out early in this game and really were, and we've seen it in stretches. And when this team plays tough, they play really well, but they also go through stretches, they'll have really good offense, and then it's like they relax and they settle for shots. And they'll play some really good stretches of defense and force some shot clock violations, and then they relax a little bit. So I think this team is still, and whatever that reason is, because it's the second year in a new system, because you've got injuries, because you're still working out the chemistry. There's probably many, many reasons that contribute to it. But this team, I think, is still trying to figure out, how to have the kind of toughness that Archie wants them to have to win with the kind of profile they have. Because, remember, this is a team that, we made 7 3-pointers tonight, which is good. I thought that was a key. We were going to have to make 5, 6, 7 threes, and we did.
And without Juwan's missed threes, they hit 50%.
Yeah.
So.
And so this was a good overall, by the numbers, a pretty good offensive game, but we're not just going to go out there and be this high-flying, prolific offense. We're still, that can keep us in games, but we're going to win games with toughness. And in some of the games that we've won late, we've really had that late. And, when it was kind of winning time tonight, we didn't have that mental and physical toughness. And I think that's just something that still has to develop within the program. It's not there. It's a little bit inconsistent. If you're going to go on the road and win a game like this against a team like Maryland, when things aren't going your way for a little while, I think you got to have that toughness. What else we have? Andy, what else you have for this segment? What other storylines have we not hit yet?
I just don't even know if I can hit any others. I really think we've hit on just about everything. We talked Romeo and Juwan. I guess we didn't touch on Devontae a whole lot. We alluded to him a little bit. I thought
he was great at the start of the game.
Yeah, he and made all 5 of his free throws, didn't have a turnover. As we said, though, I just thought some of the shot selection and understanding, what was needed when, which I think is, at this point, I think you can make the argument about him and with Fitzner. I think we know who these guys are at this point, and
you can win with how Devontae played tonight. When he gives you 15 points, makes his free throws, gets a couple of assists, gets some rebounds. Yeah, no turnovers. Like, he was not perfect, and you'd like to have some of those possessions back, but you can win with this from him. Like, you need a third guy to step up and get double. What did we talk about on Assembly Call Radio? And Devontae gives you 15 points. So he is a reason that some of those possessions didn't go our way, but I don't think he's a reason we lost tonight.
I think that's fair.
And you mentioned that some of those bad shots were like turnovers. I completely agree with you. I do not argue that at all. But a lot of people, I think it's easy because he's struggled in the past. People immediately, every time he has a bad shot, go, "Oh, he's killing us." And he did not kill Indiana tonight.
He makes one mistake, and my Twitter mentions go insane, and I just can't look.
And so
ridiculous.
It's, 4 of 10 from the field. I bet the thing is, I think the perception of Devontae is such that if you ask people after the game, write out what you think his stats are, they'd never be
7 turnovers, 2 for 18 from the field.
And look, Devontae does a lot of dribbling. I don't love that. I mean, he's not like what he does is not my favorite kind of basketball, but you can't deny what he does sometimes is a product of the fact that nobody else is doing anything. And in the first half, a couple times in that really bad stretch, he drove in and took floaters in the lane. I'm fine with that if nobody else is going to step up and try and attack. And he missed them both. But you drive into the lane, you can get fouled. Maybe it goes in. He's made shots like that before. Those aren't my favorite shots. But if nobody else is stepping up, then that's just, he has to do that in some way, in some cases. So again, if you get this performance from Devontae Green every week or every game, you're thrilled with it. If everybody else steps up and does what they're supposed to do and the team defends like it's supposed to.
I did think he struggled. I thought he did a really good job on Cowan in the first half. Some of the shots that Cowan made, I think he might have only made 3 in the first half, were really difficult shots. I did not think he was as disruptive defensively in that. That one play that Jerod mentioned where he just kind of was flat-footed and just wasn't back and set. I think there were sequences where he kind of let his struggles offensively in the second half impact his defense a little bit more than you would like. That's probably one thing that I would say. The shot selection I was not a huge fan of, but I can, as you said, if he scores 15 points in a lot of games, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you kind of look, took him, 10 shots to do it, 4 of 10. I don't know, but the free throws were a positive, and he was a positive in the plus minus on the game. But I thought defensively in the second half was probably more of a struggle than anything from my perspective.
Yep. All right, coming up on our final segment, we hand out our game balls. We hit any other storylines we haven't hit yet, and then in last call, we will deliver our final thoughts on Indiana's loss to Maryland. That is next on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I am Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and we are wrapping up our breakdown of Indiana's 78-75 loss to Maryland tonight. Guys, it's time to hand out our game balls. Currently for the season, Juwan and Romeo both have 5. Deron has 2. Rob Finnessy, Devontae Green, and Justin Smith all have 1. Ryan, let's go to you first. Who gets your game ball tonight?
It's Romeo. I think pretty solidly. I think that, I have my critiques of his game and how he played. As
nobody even said anything. You're so sensitive before
you're looking at it out. I can see you, right? It's the internet is a magical thing, and I can actually see you.
I didn't know I was judging you out loud, but apparently I was. So.
Yeah, definitely.
It was your eyes, Andy.
Definitely those accusatory eyes I get from Bottoms all the time. No, I would say that I have some critiques of like when he picked his spots, but the thing is he's the best player on the floor every time he steps on it, but he doesn't always look like it. Sometimes Juwan Morgan will look like the best player on the floor. Sometimes it's, Jordan Poole from Michigan or whatever in stretches. Tonight he was the best player on the floor for 2/3 of the game, I thought, and a long and that stretch late in the second half where he took over was stunning. I mean, it was absolutely stunning. And that showed you the kind of player he is and why, a lot of people have said, like, why is this guy going to be a lottery pick? Like, I haven't seen that from him. That was,
Who?
I mean, not IU fans, by the way, just like people who have watched one game or something. That showed you right there. I mean, that was vintage Kobe Bryant takeover stuff, and it was brilliant. And so yeah, I think that I'd like to see more stretches like that because Romeo is a team player and he plays a lot within the offense. But that was really stellar. And when he is feeling it, he needs to just go.
Sometimes the best thing you can do for your team is to go and be that guy. Andy, who gets your game ball?
It was Romeo for me. I mean, I don't know.
You want to give somebody honorable mention? I mean, I'm going Romeo too, but I'm going to give somebody honorable mention.
No, I won't. No, I'm just kidding. I mean,
Andy's feisty tonight.
No, I'm just kidding. I mean, if I had to give somebody honorable mention, I guess I would
battle with.
I guess I would say Justin Smith, just because he was, there was such a difference when he was on the floor and off. But yeah, I mean, it was Romeo when, really kept the game from getting completely out of hand and almost single-handedly brought it back. I think at one point he had scored 20 of 24 for IU or something of that nature, and 12 in a row at one point. So yeah, it was an impressive stretch and just showed what a good scorer he was.
Yeah, I mean, Romeo is the clear choice for game ball. There's no question about it. It's one of those things, like, I want to, give it to Justin Smith because his defense was so good and we were so much better when he was on the court. But then, his own fouls took him off the court. So, I mean, that's his own problem. Some honorable mention to Juwan Morgan too. And, a little mini game ball to Rob Finney for getting back on the court. That was awesome. We kind of heard, a rumor, a little bit before the game, like maybe he's going to, be out there. Maybe he's going to be able to play. And, sure enough, he was. And that was just awesome to see him back out there. He played 17 minutes, which is actually a lot more minutes than I thought he would. And I thought it was interesting that Archie, kind of managed his minutes, but had him in there at the end of the game. He wanted Rob in there at the end of the game. And so I think, hopefully he's able to, maybe get up to 25 minutes or something against Nebraska because he makes such a big difference for this team. And so just having him out there was really big. And to me, I thought that might have been part of the reason why this team came out and started so well is, it's been such a thin bench for a while. When you hear before the game, hey, Rob's back and, Duran's going to be available to play and Jake's back. To me, I kind of thought maybe the starters were like, hey, let's go out balls to the walls here at the start of this game because we've got a bench behind us. Now,
it was certainly a mental boost.
Yeah, the game flow did not end up going that way because, the guys who play a lot of minutes still had to play a lot of minutes. Although, Al and Devontae were able to obviously, get more rest with Rob out there. But I think that's big. And while Indiana wasn't able to carry that momentum into a victory tonight, hopefully it helps to lead to some momentum for Monday night for what I expect to be an awesome crowd at Simon Scott Assembly Hall. It's a big game. Nebraska's a good team, but Indiana, this game against Maryland should have won this game, right? They're, it's an even team. They're at home. They won this game. That this game Monday night, Indiana should win this game. Pretty evenly matched teams, but you're at home. You've got to have it. Nebraska is not as tough of a matchup for Indiana as Maryland is. And maybe we'll just take a couple minutes here, Andy, because we're not going to have a ton of time to preview Nebraska because it's a quick turnaround on Monday. Whereas I thought Maryland really presented some specific problems, Nebraska, while good, I don't think presents the same kind of mismatch challenges. Or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
They're an interesting team to me. They rely a lot on, kind of the main four guys that everybody talked about with them coming back, with three seniors and a junior and, James Palmer, Glenn Watson, Isaac Copeland, and Isaiah Roby. I mean, those are the guys using the vast majority of their possessions. So they're really, really reliant on those guys. And so in some ways it's a team, they certainly have other guys that they're playing. But their roster from a production standpoint is pretty top heavy. I guess not all that unlike, what we've seen from IU. So I think if you can find ways to, get one or two of those guys in some foul trouble, I think that becomes incredibly important. Palmer's really the guy who makes it go for them. He was one that I was a little bit, maybe I just didn't watch them enough last year, but when he, I think, made first team All Big Ten or something like that. Last year I was surprised. But in watching him play a little bit this year, I mean, he really does do a lot for them. So, luckily their offensive rebounding percentage numbers are not off the charts, so that'll probably be a welcome sight for everybody. But they're a team that's really good offensively, and so when you look at their efficiency numbers, they're ranked right now, as I'm looking on KenPom, 10th in adjusted offensive efficiency, and for a team that just gave up 51 points in the second half, I don't know that is quite the elixir for what ails IU at this point, but I do think being able to get back home with the students there will be important. And Nebraska has not necessarily played well in road games so far. Have lost at Minnesota, at Maryland, at Iowa. So if there's a positive to be taken away, they've not played well away from home. Their only true road win was at Clemson by 2 points in the Big Ten ACC Challenge. So I think that helps, gives you a little bit of a little bit of confidence, and maybe that's something that with the crowd behind them, something that can push IU through the moments when they're need to stem the tide and do something like that. So I think it'll be a good game, but I do think a better matchup, but also a team that's proven to be pretty good offensively. So not too much room for a letdown by any means.
Couple quick things from the chat mob real quick. Ryan, you stirred people up with the Kobe Bryant comparison, but people generally agreeing with it.
I just thought it was a Kobe sequence. Yeah. There were times where he would go on hot streaks where he'd score like 18 straight points for the Lakers. Yeah. I mean, it's just.
And also, to bring everybody down, here's this from our good friend Galen Clavio. IU scored fewer points in the first 10 minutes of the second half tonight than they scored in the first 10 minutes of the first half versus Michigan. Ouch. So, look, this has been kind of a whack-a-mole program for about 5 years, where it's like you have a problem, and it's a big problem, then you fix it, and then another thing that you were good at just falls by the wayside, and that's kind of what happened tonight. We fixed the start, and we've been a team that's been dynamite in second halves, especially the start of second halves, and it looked like we were well on our way to that with that first bucket, and then our pets' heads fell off. So it was not good after that. All right, let's get to last call. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember that because you're an Assembly Call listener, you get 15% off your entire order at HoosierProud.com and HomefieldApparel.com. So if you want officially licensed IU gear, go to HomefieldApparel.com. And if you want one of our Assembly Call logo t-shirts or one of Hoosier Proud's unique Indiana-inspired designs, visit HoosierProud.com. And on both sites, use the promo code ASSEMBLY at checkout for 15% off of your entire order. All right, guys, it's time for last call. Ryan, one more time to defend the point that you made in segment one.
No, I'm actually going to say this was not the way I wanted to spend my Friday night, watching a loss and then having to stare at YouTube jokers for an hour. But no,
you're just lashing out because you know that you're wrong. It's fine. That's it's very unbecoming.
100% right. What I will say is, Indiana, there is stuff they can learn from this loss. And look, this team is going to have to weather some stuff with the injuries and everything. This team's going to have to weather some stuff. And tonight is one of those nights where you got to weather something. And it didn't go right. And they ran out of steam and allowed Maryland back in the game. And Maryland took advantage. So kudos to them. What Indiana needs to do is come out and win on Monday. And the other thing they need to do is get healthy. I mean, we've been saying that for weeks, but Indiana needs to get healthy. That's the only way that you're going to be able to have a deep bench, that you're going to be able to give rests to guys like Morgan and Langford and feel confident about the results, is when you get a deeper bench and you get more guys who can do things off the bench. Missing Race Thompson, we don't know what the situation is. We don't know how long he's going to be out, but he's a guy who I think can do some things in this league and right now. And this may be a lost season. We don't know because he hasn't been playing. But some of these other guys need to A, get healthy, and B, get some more experience and be able to contribute and take advantage of the opportunities when they do get in. Like a Clifton Moore needs to take advantage of the opportunity next time he gets on the floor and attack and do something that makes the coaches know that he can't sit on the bench anymore, because they need something from this bench and their depth, and they don't have it right now. So that's what needs to happen to this Indiana team. They need to win on Monday. There's no question about it to me. You can't go to 3-3 after starting 3-0. It just for the momentum of the way everything is going. You need to win that one. Settle yourself. Stem the tide of this losing streak, and then they need to get healthy. And those are the two most important things right now. If you're an Indiana fan, look for them to hopefully get a win on Monday, and then just kind of work their way to health.
Yep. All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you. See you, Ryan. All right, Andy, last call.
Like I said at the beginning,
apparently dinner with his parents is more important than listening to what we have to say.
Yeah, us jokers. All right. Yeah. Anyway, what are you going to do?
He's just mad because we called him out.
Yeah, I know.
taking my mic and going home.
Yeah. No, I just, I go back to what I said at the beginning. It's funny to look at this game and the Michigan game, and they're both losses, and the way that they unfolded led you to feel worse about the one that you lost by 3 as opposed to the one that you lost by, 12 or 13 or whatever the final margin of the Michigan game ended up. And, the reality is they just had such a bad stretch toward the end of the first half and the beginning of the second. It's funny. Somebody asked me on Twitter, I think one of our favorites, the Hank Hill on Acid Twitter account, asked basically, because I said, I made a point about this stretch where, scored 33 points on 21 possessions. It basically like played it even. His question was, what was points per possession from when it was 28-14 until Maryland led 43-37? So not being trite, genuinely curious. I was just figuring it up now. I was trying to do that while Ryan was talking. IU, I can tell you, scored 9 points on 21 possessions in that stretch. And Maryland scored, I believe, if I'm doing the math correctly, 29 points on 22 possessions, just because it was the way that the half ended. So that was a huge stretch there at the end of the, going through that. So while yes, you can kind of point to that stretch in the second half where IU's offense was elite, it was also a stretch where they were really terrible, quite frankly, and just, as we said, wrong guys taking shots, and things like that. So it's a struggle because I feel like we circle back to the same points about these guys are playing a lot of minutes. There's just not depth. The bench doesn't score because there's nobody to turn to. All those kinds of things. I mean, Monday is the time for, no more excuses, and you got to find a way to win that game, because then I think you've got some time off. You go into Purdue game again on a team that's a lot like IU right now. They're very reliant on, in their case, one guy instead of two. But at some point you got to start to build some momentum in the stretch. So hopefully that begins on Monday. I was optimistic the way this game started that you could really kind of let yourself look and say, hey, if you can, get this game on the road, you go back home, have some more time off, play, Purdue in what's sure to be a raucous and difficult environment, but one from a talent standpoint, you feel like you might be able to win with. And now you flip from that feeling potentially to now your back's kind of against the wall and you really can't or don't want to lose another game in this stretch. So Monday becomes, I think, what could be a real turning point in the season. Not to say that things are going to, go downhill completely if they lose that game, but it really becomes an important one. And so I'll be interested to see how they react. I do think there are some things to build on, but the defensive intensity has got to be there for longer than it was tonight. And that was really, keep Justin Smith on the floor, keep that intensity up. And I think it's a game they walk away with and, kind of steal on the road. But as it is, you're kind of left with a empty feeling at the end in a game that feels like you gave one away. And in the way that the Michigan game doesn't really feel like you gave it away. It was a game that you probably expected to lose and really from the jump never felt like you were in. This one feels like the opposite in a game that was imminently winnable and couldn't come away with it.
Yeah. Now, missed opportunity, no question. I mean, this was a game Indiana was likely to lose, but that they had a chance to win. And I thought Zach Osterman put it really well. It was in his pregame article. Maybe he tweeted it or something. He said, this is a game Indiana wins if they're going to compete at the top of the Big Ten. If you're going to compete for a Big Ten regular season title, you win this game. And, Indiana doesn't. So, okay, you got to go back. You got to, win that home game against Nebraska. You got to win one of the next two on the road. We've said, there are going to be some losses in January. You got to be prepared for that. There's nothing about losing by 3 at Maryland, a team that'll be in the top 25 that was already ranked 20th in KenPom, that is necessarily bad. So, we've got to take the lessons from this game, get better. I'll say, my lasting impression that I'm going to take away from this game that I hope is a harbinger of things to come is what Romeo did in the second half. And, while we gave Ryan some crap for the point that he made, there was a little kernel of truth in it, in that, when you have a guy like Romeo, he does things. I hope people appreciate this, and I think people do. He is able to do things on a basketball court that very, very few players in the history of this school, really the history of this conference, can do, when you combine his athleticism, his grace, and his skill. And especially when he's going to the basket, and just the way that he can find different angles to get to the basket, how solidly he puts the ball up on the backboard every time. He does so many little fundamental things well that make him so much fun to watch. And we saw, I didn't watch him play in high school, but, talking to Alex Bozich and other folks who, have seen him play, you heard about these just Romeo explosions that would happen, where he would just take over and, go off for 16, 18, 20 points in a quarter, and we saw that tonight. I don't think it'll be the last time. I'm hoping that this is a precursor to him starting to use more possessions for Indiana. You still have to get other guys involved, but I do think there's more opportunity for him, maybe early in the game to maybe get going a little bit. But the confidence that he seems to have now in his three-point shot, the confidence that he seems to have calling for ball screens, taking the ball and just going and getting a bucket, that's huge because this team is going to need its stars to be stars on a night-in, night-out basis to win. It wasn't enough to win tonight, but that wasn't on Romeo. He was terrific, and if this is a harbinger of what we're going to see from him down the stretch, not only is he going to be a runaway Big Ten Freshman of the Year and, be an All-American, but he's going to be able to lead Indiana to some wins that they otherwise might not get. Didn't happen tonight, but I think as we move forward with this schedule and guys get healthier and Justin Smith doesn't make fouls, you make up those 3 or 4 points, and what Romeo did tonight is enough to get you that big win on the road. Team isn't quite there yet, but I think they're going to get there in the future. So keep the faith. This was a rough loss, but I still think much, much brighter days are in the future for this team. All right, that will do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. You can also subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We will be back on Monday. We will have Banner Monday right before the Nebraska game, so come hang out with us then. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Thank you for being here and for listening to this episode of the Assembly Call. We appreciate it. And we really do rely on the support of audience members like you to keep our show going and to keep growing. And so we have set up a page on our website at assemblycall.com/support that lists 5 ways that you can support the Assembly Call. And we encourage you to choose whichever method is the easiest and most convenient for you. One of the methods is donating, and so many of you have donated, and we appreciate it so much. On that page, you can choose a monthly recurring donation or an annual recurring donation or just a one-time donation, whatever works for you. And if you don't want to donate, another way to support the show is you can use our affiliate URLs, iutickets.shop or iustore.shop when you're going to shop for tickets or gear, and we will get paid a small commission when you use those links. But however you support the show, we appreciate it. Thank you.